All right, welcome back everyone to JFace Games. Today we are going to continue to talk about powers. So you can say this is Powers video 2.0, maybe 3.0, I'm not sure where we're at. So where we left off was I was talking about powers and I was showing you some powers, and after that video was posted and I got some really good comments from people, I got a little bit down on the power system. Not the mechanics, not the spark points and the soul points and all of that. More that I felt I was getting too mechanical. Like, sometimes that's the problem with game design, is that you get really into the weeds on building good mechanics. And the next thing you know, it feels too mechanical. And an RPG needs to feel both mechanical but also very thematic. And I still want it to feel, if we look back at our core tenets here, fast combat, tactical combat. So yes, we want tactical, but we want it to be thematic, okay? So I went back to the game, I think the game that I was really interested at the time, that I went back to that I felt was amazing game, but not as much depth as I'd want in a game, was Quest. And the reason I went back to it is because I thought that it had a really cool power system and power trees, and I thought those powers were very thematic, okay? So what I started doing, and I'm going to show you my, I've decided to put powers once again into Obsidian, but now I've made this one, it's published, so anyone can come here and take a look at it. But what I started doing was I took Quest and I wrote down all the powers and all the sort of trees they have, right? Because I liked the way they had their trees. Okay, so I wrote all these trees out. And then what I did was I wrote down also the trees for, or not the tree, yeah, the trees for the cipher system. Like what were the different things and what were some of the other powers, and these are just the names of them. And then I went through, I didn't get through this completely, but I started going through Open Legend and I started writing down some of the names of the Banes and some of the boons, and I stopped. Because I wanted inspiration, right? And one of the things I was inspired by was, I'll give you an example. And I'll give you an example of what I meant by, I felt like it was getting too mechanical and it was getting a little bit too uninspired, I guess, or maybe it didn't feel impactful enough, like the players had player agency, I'm not sure. But let me give you an example of what I meant. So if we go back to, for instance, where's volley? If we go back to volley and we said superior volley, and you see this, I think it sounds good, right? It's a volley. You're going to target a zone in the distance. It costs 1 action. Who knows how many spark points it costs? And you strike every target there. Great. And that sounds good, right? But it sounds very mechanical. Like I didn't feel like it had, I don't know, some sort of agency, right? Or some sort of control of the players. Now, I'm not talking about control in the sense of like Fate, where you're changing some of the dynamics of the story, but like, let's look at an example of Quest. So one of the powers, the basic powers, counterattack. Now focus on this top up here, because this is the actual Quest card, like what the power is. When an enemy within reach rolls a tough choice or worse, so that's pretty much on a dice roll if it's like a failure, right? Which I think is like a 10 or lower. On a basic attack against you, you parry their attack and take no damage. If they roll a failure or worse, you may immediately roll the die to make a basic attack. So what I like is this part. Like if you read this part, you parry, you automatically do it. I like the immediacy of it, right? I like the idea that you automatically do it. It just happens. And so what that made me start thinking about is, well, let's go back to the idea of what constitutes enemies. And maybe we make 3 tiers of enemies, right? So the concept of what an enemy is still all the same mechanics, but let's say that enemies fall into boss, normal, and minion, right? Let's just say that. Because now if we do that, we can now change some of the concepts behind these, like, the concepts behind some of these abilities, right? So bear with me. So let's go to, I did this with Cleave. If we go to Cleave, you carve through your designated target into an enemy close, or into I should say a close enemy. And designated target sounds, if this is thematic text, that's terrible. All right, so you have to have a two-handed weapon. So far, yes. D6, okay. If there are more than one enemies in your zone, so they don't even have to be engaged with you, just in your zone, and for one action, and this is where things get a little bit, like, I don't want it to sound too mechanic, but I like the agency. If your initial target is a boss or normal monster, then you roll a striker attack. Then you roll another one if it's another boss or monster in your zone. So pretty much I get to try and attack 2 different people with 1 dice. Great. If I hit, the first target takes 2 hits, the second one takes 1 hit, right? Cool. So I'm targeting 2 targets. But now this third bullet point, or this bottom one, if initial or secondary targets are minions, you just kill it outright, right? And some people might be like, like, what? It just costs, in essence, you could pay 2 spark points, not even have to roll any dice, and you're killing 2 minions. But I think you should be able to, right? Like, I like the idea of you just start, like, if you need to wreck face, you pay the stress, and if it's a minion, then you wreck face, right? I like that there's a little bit of a, I just want a thematic moment right now and then to make it happen. Boom. If we go back to counter attack, I was taking this concept and I was saying, okay, good. Now this one instead is an enemy uses an action to attack you, you use your reaction, you get to make an immediate attack against that target. Boom. But then I have variations. If it's riposte, that means, once again, look, now we add a defender die because you're actually being defensive. An enemy attacks you, you use your reaction, you get, I don't know yet, but either you get advantage or you get pluses to a defend die against the roll, and you make the immediate action. So now I'm not just counterattacking him, I'm slipping the attack and counterattacking him. What about reckless counterattack? Reckless counterattack is, now I don't care, I'm stepping into it. The enemy makes an attack against you, you surprisingly step closer and into their attack to use their momentum against them. So now it's a D8 striker, so it's a little bit more of a higher striker die. Enemy uses an attack against you, use your reaction. Now you get disadvantage or minus to the defensive die roll, and you make an immediate attack against the use your striker die, and you do additional hits against it. So you do more damage against it. So those two don't really have the concept of the minion thing, but you can see how I'm changing a little bit of the flavor. I think the early ones were just a little bit too, I was thinking in terms of like, what's the zones, what's the damage I can do, how can I affect the dice? Whereas I'm trying to use these as prompts to help me think through what's the flavor text here that I want, and what's the cinematic moment that I want the player to have, right? If I cleave, if they're, we already talked about sort of part of the issue, part of the concept being like, if something has a low death die, it should feel cinematic already. So if we already talked about the monster mechanics, if someone's death number is 4, because they're a goblin, and I've got a D8, then odds are I'm killing them anyways. But now, I like this idea, well, maybe there's a minion that's death die is not super low. Maybe like there's a orc minion, right? Or an ogre minion. And that ogre minion, their normal death die is like, I don't know, a 5? So now it's a little harder for most people. But if I'm awesome, and it's a minion, and it's supposed to feel like a minion in the context of the combat, then if I need to, I spend stamina to just make stuff happen, right? And if it's a minion, technically there should be lots of them coming at me. So that's where I think that's where I'm going to start heading with this. This is the powers. Once again, if you want to, you can come to this page. I'll leave a link to it in the doobly-doo. And take a look, see what you think. I'm going to be adding to this and flavoring it and changing it. Hopefully the designers of Quest don't get upset with me because I have their context here, but it's not the whole game. And I'll be deleting them as I go. I just want it as a template. It's more of like an homage. I've bought all the Quest and I've backed both Kickstarters, so I love the game. So hit the bell button, hit the subscribe, stick with me, and we're going to keep designing some games. Take care, guys.